Gabe, do you guys want to give kind of a quick intro for people who haven't watched the first video setting the table?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Brian Dell. I'm part of the Labs team along with Zach, Katie, and Gabriel. I ostensibly operate around what's thought of as innovation strategy. What that tends to mean is the way pieces fit together over time, both in a business's life and in the kind of world of the customer and the world of the market that they're trying to operate in. And then how you can plan for that. I've started a bunch of little, what I now think of as my toy businesses from a very young age, everything from managing bands and managing clubs to design studios to a little bit of software, a little bit of things like that, and a consulting business. And now I largely advise startups on how to think a little bit clearer about their customers and the problems their customers have in order to shape the way their business can operate for them.
That's fantastic. I want to hear, we should put together a Spotify playlist of the bands that you manage, man. Gabe, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I strategically let Brian go first so I could finish my little snack here. Gabriel, I head of market strategy and business intelligence for the Labs Consensys team. I guess my quick blurb would be, I started my career, I spent years of a misspent youth in finance, which was my dream job. I started paper trading commodities when I was 15 years old. Like, I wanted to be in finance. That was my dream. And then I got into finance and quickly realized that my dream was slowly becoming a nightmare. It's not at all what I wanted to do. And I've always had a disdain for authority. So I decided to go off and start a couple companies. Two just huge embarrassments, like the way that they flopped, the size of the flops. I won't get into them. Like, I was my first company was a fintech company. We're just now starting to see the beginnings of what my original product idea and business was. So one, super early in the market. Two, didn't understand the customers. Three, didn't have the technical chops. Four, didn't have any advisors to help me. Five, I mean, you could just go through the laundry list. And you would think that I learned my lesson after that first startup, but I didn't. I started a second company, which I won't get into the horror story, but made zero sense. I finally learned my lesson with my third startup, which was a real estate transaction software management company, a SaaS for realtors. Found a really great niche marketplace that was just starting to get a lot of traction and momentum. The company just took off. I mean, if you looked at a graph of the growth of our customer base, it was just a up and to the right hockey graph. And so then after exiting that business, I went to a company called VaynerMedia where I honed my growth engineering and technical skills. And then I ended up becoming entrepreneur in residence within that company. So started a couple of subdivisions within the larger holding company and organization. I was always a scrappy entrepreneur, but one of the companies was our own media digital publishing business, where I really learned how to build things that have to scale to a lot of customers. So our portfolio went north of 1 billion impressions in about a 2.5-year timeline. And yeah, so I left that company in January of this year to come see if I could hack on and figure out this blockchain thing. And what does building traction even look like for blockchain companies? And
have you figured it out?
Oh man, no way. I feel like every day I learn from really smart, talented people across the Consensys network, guys and girls like yourselves. So no, it's an interesting challenge, and I'm having a lot of fun trying to figure it out.
That's fantastic. I think, and let's just kind of like, I think, jump into it, right? Like you've both had started multiple companies. I mean, your entire lives essentially, right? Like even from early teenage years onward. Just give me a broad overview of like, what is your approach? Like whenever you have that idea, and how do you kind of dig into it?
Yeah, I'll go first, Gabriel. I think Gabriel and I work very closely together as a default every day. So we share a lot of opinions here. I think I imagine he's going to eventually say something about arbitrage that I probably won't say, just because I know his brain works that way. But I think one place we really align on is almost every single, my natural instinct for every single business I've approached has been to see somebody with a problem and then try to get to know that problem a little bit better. My old company, GMD Studios, my business partner there, Brian Clark, he used to have a saying is, if you can find me a customer, I'll help you create a company around it. And so I think I'm a pretty staunch believer in becoming problem obsessed in order to then get customer obsessed. But not every problem has a series of customers. So my approach tends to be just to really obsess around what are the actual conditions of a problem, what are the nuances of a problem area, and then figure out who the customer for that problem actually is, and then work to solve that thing, and then go backwards towards a company.
Yeah, Brian and I literally share a brain on this. I mean, the sole purpose of a business is to find a customer, and otherwise, the difference between. I used to say this to our early growth engineers. The difference between a business and a feature is a customer, right? So like you can build really cool features and really cool things, and I'm actually really guilty of this. I am not an entrepreneur. I'm like the artist entrepreneur. I really do fall in love with my products and my projects, and I get super romantic about them, and that's caused me, that has worked a lot, and it's also caused me a lot of pain in my life. There's nothing worse than toiling over trying to create something that when you put it into the market, eventually it turns out people don't really care about and want. And so I try to spend a lot of my time thinking about how to avoid that pain myself, how to help other entrepreneurs avoid that pain. And so, yeah, I mean, you can build really cool stuff, and you can fall in love with your projects, but when you're ready to turn it from a feature into an actual business, that really, the marketplace decides. And so I like to try to reverse engineer outcomes, or at least de-risk things, especially as I get a little bit older. You know, I don't have an infinite amount of time anymore. Not that I ever did, but in my head, I think I did. And so like you want to build things that you want to spend your time on things that, that one, you really care about, but also other people are also going to care about and get a lot of value from. And so, yeah, I don't know. That's, Brian and I shared a brain on this one. Get a customer.
Right. That totally makes sense. But so I guess I would be really interested to get you both to kind of expound on how, like, what are the telltale signs, right? Like, because I know personally me, I probably fall more into the artist branch. And I'm curious as to how both of you sort of differentiate between falling in love with the product or with a feature or with like the thing that you're making versus falling in love with the problem and the customer. Like, is there sort of how do you guys feel about that?
I'll start with this one. I think Brian and I share a brain on this one as well, but I find this a lot in the technology space that we operate in. Is the people who love technology don't always love customers. And one of the things that I think for me at least, it took a lot of effort in the early stage of building my companies, is starting to design your business around having empathy for other people. And like empathy is an easy thing to talk about. It's a really, really hard thing to do, which is to remove your set of circumstances and ways that you've experienced the world, and put yourself in another person's shoes, and in this case your customer's shoes, and like really think about the thing that you're designing from another person's perspective. And that's why I spend a lot of time talking about niching down and like getting small to get big, right? If you niche down into markets, if you niche down into underserved marketplaces, if you really get to hone in on this customer, you can start to develop a lot of empathy for this person. That's like a soft skill. It's like, right, we don't like to talk about it a lot, but I think but a part of empathy is understanding the problem set, and what your feature set how your feature set needs to be designed around that problem set from the eyes of the other person, not you. And I think that's an extremely valuable skill set to build when trying to build a product.
That totally makes sense. Brian, do you have anything you want to add? You're muted.
The biggest difference between a feature and a problem is a feature is yours, a problem is theirs, right? So I think that's the shortcut around that is the questions you ask when you're trying to understand. An artist creates a kind of business as an exchange for value, right? So I think the questions you need to ask to create a business dynamic are, how do you currently deal with this problem, right? It's talk to me about the last time you had this problem. How much pain, suffering, or money does this problem cost you? Those are all questions where you'll actually learn about the business you're in without having to articulate what the product or the feature you might build to then like kind of take part in or capture that value shows up. So I think problem obsessed tends to be questions like that open room for the customer's experience versus room for your solution.
That's actually a really important point that I think Brian just touched on, which is you know, the natural tendency, especially when you're doing research around a particular domain that you might not have previous experience about, when you're having conversations with customers or potential customers and trying to understand the problem, you'll tend to get people who will say, hey, it'd be great if you did this or that, and like they're telling you like a product or a feature that they would want. But your job as a builder of a business or a product or as an entrepreneur is to get to the root, like what are they really talking about, right? So I love that quote. It's been thrown around and rehashed, you know, hundreds of thousands of times. The Henry Ford quote. You know, if I asked my customers what they wanted, they would have told me a faster horse. But there's a negative truth in that, which is get to the root cause, the root pain of the customer. They'll try to tell you the feature that they want or how they think you should solve the problem. But if you keep digging, you can actually get to what the actual thing is, and you might be able to design a better solution for it.
Yeah, so whenever I'm user testing, right? I think it's important to look at even when you're testing features, right? It's important to look at the suggestions that they're making, not necessarily as prescriptive, but as symptoms. I'm not looking to actually understand, get like their feedback on like a specific piece, but I want to understand like the pains that they're describing as symptoms of like larger or bigger issues and try to figure out better solutions around that. So that totally makes sense, especially like from an entrepreneurial perspective. That's great. And I kind of want to like go back to whenever we were talking about like, that makes sense as far as the entrepreneurial quotes that are sort of used ad nauseum. Like I think another one that I've seen over and over again, I'd be curious to get y'all's take, is the whole idea that like you use almost a completely different set of skills, of muscle groups whenever you're going from like a company that's pre-product market fit to a company that is product market fit or that's scaling, et cetera. Like it's almost completely different skill set. And I'm curious, like, since y'all have sort of been through the spectrum, right? You've been at that early stage. You've been in sort of like the early stage. You've even gotten into companies that have started scaling. What are those different skill sets, especially at the early stage, for people who maybe have only worked in like the startup stage when they've secured funding, they're in, you know, companies that have been rapidly scaling? What do they need to start looking at in themselves as far as the skills that they need to be developing for this like pre-market, like, you know, nights and weekends, like hustling sort of thing?
That's a great question. And I imagine there's a million great answers to it. Even just as we've been going through this, watching the way people are approaching, going through the hackathon, watching the way people are approaching project ideas and things like that. I tend to think of, this is both a sort of a strategy frame, but it's also a company building, I think, frame. You kind of go through two phases. The first phase is noticing and naming. That's where you're trying to look at the thing as a system, and the thing might just be a customer's experience or a person's experience. And then you're trying to understand the interplay between the different parts. Let me give a great example. My bar, very long time ago, this is where I kind of codified this idea of noticing and naming. But I noticed when our jukebox wasn't on and our door wasn't open, people walked by the door without looking in. So I named this thing dead air, right? And dead air became this issue I had to deal with. Because foot traffic was a crucial part to getting people in the bar and revenue and cash in the register, essentially. So noticing naming is the method of sort of looking at what you're trying to deal with. For me, it was getting butts in seats and feet in door, and looking at the pieces that sort of describe the interplay. The first phase of company building is a lot of like, what am I noticing and what's the interplay and what's a name I can give to that thing? That's the pain point. Because the name then lets me kind of create a whole story and a whole thesis around what I'm trying to solve for. And the second phase is building and breaking, right? Like, so one of them is head up, one of them is head down. The first one's heads up, looking around, the second one heads down. Building and breaking is much more about, let's do something very quickly, put it in front of that problem, or in front of that pain point that we found and see what happens to it. And very often what happens to it won't work. So we put a speaker outside the first day. Think about speakers outside. They sound like sidewalk music. And people walk by, they might like bob their head a little bit more, but they're not getting people in the door. So it took a very specific, we need to hang the door open. We need to put the jukebox a little bit closer to it to get people to actually turn and pay attention to the door. So I think that those are the two phases of, if not skill sets, sort of vantage points that I think early project people tend to look for. And they happen at different layers. Like you shouldn't spend too long in noticing and naming because you don't have to be absolute. You can change a lot in the building and breaking phase. But all you have to do is start to develop a kind of cohesive, succinct, strategic story, strategic frame around what you think you're trying to do in order to then hold yourselves to it when you get into more of the kind of shipping, building, and breaking phase.
I love that. I mean, it's very much like it's a design thinking framework, right? It's evaluate, it's hypothesize, and then it's build and then test, and then you just iterate around that. That's fantastic. Gabe, you unmuted. I'm sorry, I didn't mean that.
Yeah, no, all good. I actually have a different way of thinking about this, and I think Brian's right. There's a million ways you could answer this question. In the early stage, especially when you're building a product, job number one is survivability. So, and again, like, I've made every one of these mistakes in the book. The tendency that I see is I've got this product and I'm gonna keep trying to force this product on the marketplace. And like, but what do you mean? Why don't you understand this? This is a brilliant solution, right? It's like falling in love with the thing as opposed to trying and experimenting a lot of things and putting a lot of iterations out there. The primary job to be done in the early stages of building a product is not falling in love with the thing that you originally built, but doing multiple iterations of it, because your job is to survive. And the environment, the startup ecosystem, everything is working against you. Right? Like you don't have proper funding, nobody really cares about you, you don't have brand name recognition. So your job is to survive. And the way that you survive is you do not become romantic about the thing that you're building. You stay mission focused, right? Like the large mission, the thing that you're really obsessed about is the thing that stays consistent, but how you deliver the good or service or the product should change, and it should be malleable over time. Once it starts clicking, like you'll see it. When you really hone in on a thing and you've identified the right problem and you've got product market fit and the thing that you're delivering in the marketplace is consistent with what the marketplace wants, you start getting traction. That's the second phase that starts to kick in, and that's all about building infrastructure. And that's a very, very different skill set. Like when I came out of my scrappy entrepreneurial days, and then we were building this digital publishing platform, and we were starting to get 1 million unique visitors, and then 10 million unique visitors, and then 100 million unique visitors. At each one of those stages, the rules of the game changed, and I couldn't be scrappy anymore. I needed to have more infrastructure. And I was about building infrastructure, is about building teams who could operate. It was about building, marketing systems and structures and processes. That's a different game. But the early stages.
How do you know when the infrastructure phase is?
So for me, I just have to get punched in my face repeatedly. It's like, I don't know that there's like a decision rubric for that. Like all of a sudden things change and things start breaking, and I'm sure they're much better. I know there are much better entrepreneurs than me out there. That I've actually, there's a really great model that I heard. I wish I could remember who it was so I could give them proper credit. But it was the 10-30-10 rule or something like that. When your company grows by 30% or 10x's from the earlier stage. I forget the exact rubric. Somebody had something that was really interesting, but it's it's the scale issue. All your existing systems start breaking and falling apart, and nothing's working. But the early days, because I know we've got people that are in the nights and weekends and trying to get their DeFi product off the ground as a part of this hackathon. In the early days, I think it's really important to be married to the mission, but not to the thing that you're actually building. You want to iterate a lot. You want to try a lot of different things. You're trying to, a phrase that I use a lot is engineering moments of serendipity. You're just trying to create a lot of interactions and eventually something clicks. That's what you're looking for.
That totally makes sense. I like both of those answers. I'm gonna Google around to see if I can find the 10-30-10, and I'll try to include that in the show notes at the end of this. I've heard both of you guys talk, and I think this is a really interesting perspective to have for a hackathon. Hackathons are usually sort of like framed around code. I've heard both of you talk about starting companies, like software companies or product companies, without code. Gabe, I think you've even got an article coming out soon on this. Do you guys mind talking through what that looks like, right? Because a person who programs, like my first impression, my first instinct is to open up an IDE and start going to work. So like, where is that kind of coming in for y'all?
Yeah, so I've actually got a couple different strategies. I've got a number of them, but I'll talk through a couple that we've actually got an article coming out shortly on these. So there's a couple of ways to go about it, and here's the reasoning for this, right? So it's not like the idea is not to avoid writing code. I think the idea really, again, is to try to create things or try to validate ideas or business assumptions or business model assumptions or product features without wasting a lot of time and resources. Like, it's really difficult to build things. And so if you can get clear signals before you get into allocating those resources, again, just as an entrepreneur, there's nothing worse than spending what little free time and money you have to create something and then it not getting any traction. So that's all. It's pain avoidance more than anything, which is what this is about. A couple of ways to go about it. A couple that I like. One that I call the SAP wrap strategy, which is your service as a product, and then wrapping it into a productized offering. So as tech people, I know that service industries or service businesses is a dirty word, but let me explain what I mean by this. I really love the approach of trying to build non-scalable companies in the beginning. It gives you a lot of unfair competitive advantages for a lot of different reasons, but trying to figure out very lightweight ways where you can offer a service to somebody that you can later productize or use technology either to deliver the good or service, or being that we're in the blockchain space, you've got your distributed ledger, but starting out with a Web 2 version as a service-oriented business to work out all of the kinks has a lot of unfair competitive advantages. One, service businesses tend to have higher monthly recurring revenues that you can charge as opposed to product SaaS companies, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is they also tend to have higher average order values than a typical SaaS subscription model. And if you get really good about building product or technology around your service business, then your margins just go through the roof. So, the strategy I think is very simple. It's, if you can design a really lightweight, landing page with email opt-in, where you can pitch your value proposition to the marketplace, get people who will opt in and say, hey, yeah, I'm kind of interested in that. That sounds really good. And then literally outreach and go, hey, listen, as a part of this product, we're going to do X for you. It's going to cost you, Y amount of money, and then de-risk it with a no-risk offer, right? If we don't deliver, you don't have to pay us a single dime, and start building up your customer base that way. What you want to do is you want to have another person on the team, or even yourself, if it's you, kind of solo, really starting to document the process, and then figuring out how you automate the easiest, most cumbersome parts and wrapping technology around it. So that's one lightweight way. There's a couple of others: using content, spinning up products in a single weekend by using content, right? If you're savvy in paid media, and we'll have I think we'll have a whole piece on this, like that gets into some of the nuts and bolts of this. But using content to try to pitch your value proposition, spinning them up, and then running A/B tests to see which of these product ideas that you have that are most interested in the marketplace, and measuring that based on click-through rates and landing page opt-ins and things like that. Just looking for those indicators where people are like raising their hand, like, yeah, I'm really interested in this. I pay you for this. It's super fascinating. And then sprinting like hell to build a product once you've taken somebody's money. There's nothing that will make you stick to your product roadmap and deadline than taking money from somebody. It's a forcing function. And you also get your customer to pay for your product development. development. So I like these little things that you can quickly spin up to kind of de-risk your startup idea. And hackathons are a great place to do this, by the way.
I love that. Brian, what about you?
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think the important part to remember is the risk you're trying to hedge against is building something for too long. Building is hard, right? So don't build for something for too long without something telling you whether or not it's effective or good. There are lots of ways there are a lot of great examples of that already happening in really interesting ways. Dropbox launched as a video, right? The product hunt's premise is sort of kind of build a product, but more build a product hunt. You know what I mean? And that's an immediate signal for whether or not you should spend more time on it or less time on it. Another thing is just commitments. The best proxy for a business is a commitment. And so there's a great book called The Mom Test by Rob Fitzgerald, I believe. It's The Mom Test. And one of the things he's kind of, it's essentially about doing better user research. Instead of asking people if they like the thing you've built, it's just focusing on them and then trying to get commitments around sort of imaginary technology. So it could be, oh, you have this problem. I have this thing, hypothetically, that will solve this problem and reduce this pain point by this much. Could you commit money, time, or future feedback to me right now that this to look at this thing that will solve your problem? And then if people say no, that means they were probably just being polite earlier when they told you that was a really important idea. If they commit to say like, hey, I'll get a bunch of my team together and review this thing once it's built, it means it's actually an issue that they want to invest some energy into solving for. So good proxies for businesses and kind of using a startup as a learning machine, not just a thing you build as a piece of technology, are anything that puts signal and gives you back that people are willing to exchange something for it.
I love that. And I just put the Mom Test, the link to the Mom Test book into the chat. I think that's the right one, Brian. You can confirm or deny that. I just wanted to say welcome, Rob and Miguel. Really excited to have you all along. If you have questions, if you kind of want to, if this is sort of a point where you can kind of break in, if not, we can keep on talking. There will be kind of an open Q&A at the end of this as well. But please feel free to kind of jump in at any point.
Sure. This is Rob. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can, man. How's it going?
Oh, good.
Hey, Rob.
Thanks. Yeah, so I'm in a position right now where I kind of did the initial. So we built a crypto game, and we did an initial pre-sale in November, and it did well. Got about 2 months of run rate out of that pre-sale, and now we're in the state where we're just kind of eking along, trying to get the alpha built and figuring out interim kind of funding, or how do we keep ourselves alive for a month or two more. Do you guys have any thoughts about that? It's kind of the next stage after that initial interest, and you know, the product's there, people love the idea, but you know, how do we survive for 2 more months while we get it built?
Yeah. How did your first, you said you got a little bit of runway. How did that get built? Was that crowdsourced or?
Yeah, we did a pre-sale on the Ethereum blockchain, just selling some NFTs, some non-fungible tokens for our card game, our trading card game, basically. And got a nice rabid little following, about 200 players invested in it. And so totally what you were saying earlier about once you have some customers, really getting motivated to finish that thing now is very true. But you know, there's those 3 of us working on it, and now everybody's like, well, we might have to get real jobs if we can't finish this soon.
Have you been in contact with those players since? Do you guys have an ongoing sort of channel with those people?
Yeah, we've got a Discord and a Telegram as well. And I get a lot of, you know, what's going on, you guys? How come you guys haven't delivered yet? That kind of stuff. But,
are there sort of intermediary experiences that you're having before you say ship the next alpha? Are you doing anything to engage them sort of together as a group beyond just the open communication?
Yeah, a little bit. So we've thought about doing some giveaways and things like that. We have done 1 or 2 other promotional things with other projects where we kind of, let's release a few more trading cards branded with someone else's thing and do it as a giveaway, this kind of stuff. But in one sense, it's all kind of a distraction from actually finishing the alpha. So I know we could keep going and doing that, but I could spend my time in community management as opposed to actually finishing the product. So
yeah, Yeah, I think so. To your initial question was just to make sure we talk about the right thing for you.
Mhm.
How do I get more runway in order to build the alpha?
Right.
Do you think if you just focused, you'd be able to build the alpha on a runway that you can see ahead of you?
Yeah, I think so. I think
Okay.
we have about a 2-month plan from this point, and I think we can stick to it as long as I can keep the other guys around.
Mhm. Got it.
Yeah.
Rob, is Crypto Beasties your project? I just
Yeah, it is.
Okay,
That's right.
this looks dope, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun project.
I'll include the link in the show notes.
Oh, cool. Nice. Yeah, so it's it's a really fun project. We actually have a chance to do some stuff that people haven't done yet in crypto games, like a cool 3D mobile style app that people haven't done yet.
Great.
And the NFTs are a little bit innovative in that they can level up and give new powers and stuff, so they become unique over time.
I love
This is great. Holy shit, Rob. I love this. I'm just looking at your website now. Brian, sorry, were you going to chime in?
No, go ahead. I think
cool.
I wanted to make sure we got the basics down of
Yep.
Right.
the crux of the issue. Yeah.
A couple of ideas come to mind. So there's going to be no right answer, right? So that's
Sure.
I think that's the first piece of advice, and you know that, and it's choosing which trade-off you're willing to make. So I think there are really two approaches. There's the remain bootstrapped approach, and then there's start seeking professional capital approach.
Right.
I'm going to avoid the seeking professional capital approach just for a second. I'm going to talk about some of the more bootstrapped ideas. So there's a couple of ways to go about, and I think they all center around figuring out what pieces of your business you can carve off that you're already creating, and maybe packaging up or creating new variations of it and then selling it into the marketplace. And a lot of this, the fact that you have a community already, I think is really good, because you can test some of these ideas with the existing community before you open it out to new people who aren't a part of the crypto PCs community.
Right.
But simple things, right? Like selling limited edition versions of your crypto beasties, or maybe packaging up, like a kit of new versions of the crypto beasties. You've gotten something pretty spectacular off the ground. There are probably other Ethereum-based game developers that may this is a short-term runway solve, but like maybe you can consult on helping them get their startup off the ground as a way to revenue into the company temporarily. I mean, there are things like trying to use one of the crowdfunding platforms, but I would really the way to start to answer this question is to think about what pieces of the business do we currently have, or that we still need to build, that we can package up and create unique and interesting ways, or what unfair competitive advantages do we have that we think we can sell off and start creating some revenue just to get us, because it sounds like you only need 2 months. I mean, you're almost there.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a little bit of runway here, which is why I'm avoiding the professional capital route.
Right.
So those are a couple of ideas that come to mind. I mean, yeah, I don't know. Was that helpful?
Yeah, definitely. Because when I do think about it, we do have these characters all defined, got some great graphics, 3D models, things like that. So there's probably a way to do some of that, and also maybe cross brand with some other games. I've been avoiding there's some of these big game blockchain ventures going on right now that have these kind of metaverses where all the games interact with each other, and I've been kind of avoiding doing that at this point, because it really does change your game design and kind of dilutes what you're doing. But some of that might be worth, they might incentivize you to join in on those kinds of things. So that's a possibility too, we've considered.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Brian.
Rob, what do you think is the most valuable part of what you guys have built so far?
I think the fact that we went kind of from the gameplay first, and so we're not just trying to do an NFT thing. We're actually trying to do a really fun game that also lets people create these NFTs, sell them on their own marketplace outside of the game, etc. So we're coming from a different angle than a lot of the original crypto game developers came from, which was really more about the blockchain and the NFT side.
Could you sort of describe the mechanics?
Yeah, the mechanics are they're trading cards, kind of Pokemon style, but they really each one represents a character, and you create squads of 3 of these to kind of battle others in an arena style setting.
Yeah.
So it comes down to the composing these teams of 3. So there's some strategy there. And then we did decide to go full 3D with the game. So it's not just a card game. It's the characters jump off the cards and you battle them in a little 3D arena.
Oh, that's cool.
And it's all pretty cute. And, like good graphics. We're really happy with the art that we've gotten so far.
So you've got some IP that layers on top of this. You've got some game mechanics, which are sort of pretty stable, sticky game mechanics that are, again, I like the fact that you brought it. Don't create a crypto game, create a game that can run on crypto.
Yeah, exactly.
And then squads of 3, that's an interesting mechanic. I mean, have you thought about just the ability to white label the mechanics and the underlying structures and things like that?
Yeah, we actually have. And in fact, we have one group interested now that we are doing a little consulting with, because the NFT structure that we created is fairly flexible. We're able to upgrade these NFTs and even change the data structures going on in them over time. So it lends itself to pretty much any kind of collectible card kind of thing. So we're actually talking with a sports agency about a sports collectible trading card game at this point with real athletes that they represent as the cards.
That's great.
That's really cool.
Yeah, that one it's moving forward. They have this idea of doing an ICO on it, and we're trying to just say, why don't you just build something first? And the ICO can come later once there's something to be shown. But the fact is our backbone can be used for that without much change at all. So
that's great. And the way to approach this too is if you wanted to think of yourself as in a 3-month time crunch, what are the biggest swings you could take to cover to try to like kind of extend that runway immediately? Like CryptoKitties is amazing, but partially why it's amazing because the thin edge of that product is just the alliteration between crypto and kitties, and the fact that they are kitties, which is the way, which is the way that culture works, right? Things stick for various reasons, and they then have a way to open doors through sticking in the right ways. But I think the first thing I thought of was just, could you do the Democratic primary where it's squads of 3? You make some NFT cards on top of everything, and even just playing with little places where there's like, another great version would be like, I love the LeBron versus Michael Jordan kind of ongoing thread of who's the GOAT, right? Who's the greatest of all time in almost any field. The idea that I think part of your squad mechanic works for like, well, what if we put LeBron with Wilt Chamberlain with Isaiah Thomas? And there's a lot of interesting ways to kind of jump into culture a little bit more, because it seems like one thing you guys are lacking here, purely from a growth perspective, is if it's not blockchain first, which is a certain way to get traction with a certain kind of audience who just wants to follow blockchain, you need some kind of sticky thing that it's like, hey world, here's something you haven't seen before that kind of taps into a major vein of the way culture is moving. And I think you've got the engine to do that underneath. It's just a matter of layering the culture over top of it.
Cool idea. Yeah, that's really interesting, because you're right, the hook. Because we are going gameplay first, but at the same time, there's bigger studios doing bigger games than us. So it is a fun game. We're in testing at a certain level, and it's a lot of fun. But it won't be revolutionary from the gameplay side, except when you talk about the blockchain underneath.
Got it.
And all that stuff that brings.
I would also say there are 2 very nice bounties available in the decentralized finance space in the Ethereal Hackathon. Find a way to bend this into decentralized finance, and we feel pretty good about it.
Oh, cool. Excellent. Yeah, that's a great idea. And there's a Microsoft one involving a Unity game too. So
cool.
I can find a way to combine the 2.
That's fantastic.
Great. Well, thanks guys. I appreciate it. Some great ideas.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, man. Thanks for speaking up, and thanks for showing us your game. This is awesome. I'm definitely gonna check this out. Check
Yeah, I'm
this
gonna
out.
pass this around. I've got a couple of friends who are like really into games.
Oh,
I'd love
cool.
to I'd love to send this to them and just have them take a look at it.
Great. Yeah, our short term is we're getting a gameplay video together, hopefully within the next week to 10 days, and then hopefully use that to open some other doors and see where that goes.
Fantastic.
Cool.
I
Cheers.
I'm going to just open it up, Miguel. I'm not sure if you had anything you kind of wanted to jump in with. If not, I've got like a couple of questions to sort of finish this off, and we can close this open Q&A session. All right. I'm not hearing anything, so I'm assuming it's going to be okay to move forward. The last question that I had was just getting tactical with you guys, right? Like, what tools, loops should companies have in place? Beta signups, Discord channels, etc. What's essential, and what's kind of like the unsung sleeper hit as far as like early company bootstrapping pieces go?
I feel like Gabriel's going to have a lot of strong opinions about this in valuable ways. I hate to say it, but there's a reality that you can generate a lot of signal by saying concise, line broken things on Twitter, and really articulate, like trying to lead with your insight, which is a valuable way to get signal from some groups of people. I am very old school. It's probably because some of my first jobs were as a journalist. I'm very old school that if you sit down, there's a great editor's story, which is if you don't have a story, it means you haven't talked to enough people. And in general, I think a notebook and a good place to get coffee or beer is probably the best channel to begin most of these discovery systems or processes. But in reality, there are probably a number of ways that we're using right now, including open Discord, to tap into existing communities that have a high amount of communication between them already. So Metafilter was another great example of a community that I spent a lot of time in when I went to learn about sub-communities or subpopulations, submerged populations, people who shared a problem but maybe didn't share an identity, to get to know those things. But I think Gabriel's the expert on this one.
Could you push that point a little bit further? So when you're saying lead with insight, could you kind of go into that?
Yeah. So if I had to, insight's a very simple thing in hindsight. It's a very difficult thing on the ground. But you know, if I had to re-articulate Airbnb, for instance, the insight, the cultural insight that I would try to pull out of it is that people in New York City and places like that, and I think that's kind of the starting ground, don't think of their apartments as homes the way you think of a home in other places, and probably where many people grew up in the suburbs or in the country or anything like that. New York City apartments are commodities. Therefore, there's this insight that a lot of people disagreed with the Airbnb guys on, which was that people won't be so precious about renting out their homes to other people, right? Now that's a hindsight insight, but I think, you know, their insight was probably much more desperation fueled, which is a better way to do it. Even like, I need to earn some money in order to do this thing, and I have an apartment and some space in it. But I think like insights are good because they are both specific, but then highly universally leverageable, which points to both a very direct person that can solve a problem for, but the possibility for a very, very, very large group of people or a very high value problem to be leveraged. So that's what I mean by insight. Does that help, Zach?
Yeah, it totally does. It's almost in a lot of ways, it's basically what do you know or what do you believe or how do you think people act, that is unique, right? Like that people don't necessarily, that is not common knowledge, because I feel like a lot of common knowledge kind of accounts for a lot of the also ran products that sort of exist out in the space. That totally makes sense. Gabe, what about you, man? I know you've got a ton of tools.
I mean, again, Brian and I share a brain. The best product people, engineers, CTOs, technical founders, all are really good because they truly understand the customer, they understand the pain point, and they have a unique insight on it. There's a saying by Steve Blank, the founder, the creator of the Lean Canvas, where he says, "Get out of the building." So like within our portfolio, we have these protospokes, which are basically seed companies. So they're early stage companies. One of them, Atomic Loans, in our portfolio, one of the very first assignments that I gave them was, guys, get away from your keyboard. Stop thinking about building code. Get out to every fucking meetup that's in the crypto space, that's in the blockchain space, that's in the peer-to-peer lending space. Those are basically their three categories. Go to every single one of those meetups and have a lot of conversations, pitch your product, talk to a lot of people, and have a lot of in real life conversations. It's probably, to this day, they tell me it's probably one of the best assignments they ever got, because the amount of conversations that they had, the unique insights that they got, the industry experts that they got to get access to really understand the space that they're playing in has been absolutely invaluable. It's opened up all kinds of doors for them, right? So I think that is number one. That's like in the weeds tactics, like whatever space that you're building a product in, go to all the meetups, go to all the meetings, talk to all the people. Katie on our team did a really phenomenal talk yesterday with someone within Facebook about how to do cold outreach for introverts. Using tactics like that to speak to people who are subject matter experts around the space that you're trying to build a product in, I think is absolutely invaluable. You've got to have a unique insight that the marketplace doesn't have yet. And the only way that you're going to get it is by having a lot of those interactions, a lot of those conversations, and again, there's just no, it's funny that we're doing this on Zoom, but there's no replacement for in real life conversations. You're going to get something so valuable out of that experience. And then once you've got that done, the suite of products is pretty simple, right? Like the 80-20 is pretty simple. You want to have a landing page. You want to start building your CRM so that you can engage people and have conversations with people who have opted in and giving you permission to have conversations with them. And then you want to have some type of, there's no shortage of like Discord or Slack or Twitter, or like there's a ton of tools that you can use. Use the ones that you enjoy, right? That's what I would tell you. So you want to have some kind of engagement tool. You want to have some kind of landing page where you can tell your story, as a way to test how the market responds to it, but then also having some kind of opt-in CRM integration. And you can go to unbounce.com. They've got great landing pages that have been A/B tested, with tens of millions of variants. So they've been like tested in the field. Product Hunt has a ship product, which is really good, which is like your landing page, your CRM, your Stripe, out of the box. You can figure out the Web3 blockchain piece after the fact, right? Again, all blockchain is a distributed ledger. So those are nuts and bolts mechanics. You can spoof the technology in the beginning, so that you don't waste a lot of time or effort on code, and then figure out the more technical pieces once you've got some early signals that what you're creating is actually interesting or unique. But yeah, those are those interactions, I think, are the most valuable thing you can do. Every successful entrepreneur founder that I know that have built real companies, they are constant storytellers. They're constantly talking to customers. They are constantly telling their story. They're constantly engaging with their potential customers and community members and subject matter experts. And, they are just obsessed with having interactions and conversations. There's just no replacement for that.
I love that. And the idea, we talk a lot about at-bats, right? And I think the idea of like going to where the customers are and getting in front of the customers is just another way to create at-bats, more and more at-bats for your company, because you're actually getting in front of them. It's at-bats, and like they're almost like micro interactions, micro at-bats, where you're like getting those insights and you're incorporating those insights into the features. That totally makes sense. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. We got 8 minutes left. I think in closing, like, let's just kind of like riff a little bit on like what we're kind of hoping to see out of the projects with this hackathon, guys. Do you guys want to kind of talk through that?
Yeah, I think maybe a good articulation of it is we want to see. We think 15 days and kind of testing out this longer process to be able to hack on things. We'd love to see both a vision for how a product can solve something. But then also some of the entrepreneurial instincts and some of the signals that we've just been talking about that show that a team has decided to try to get this thing in front of some people that it might actually solve it for, or at least had contact with either experts in the communities that care about it. Because I think the biggest thing that an opportunity like a longer time window like this in a remote distributed hackathon like this can create is signals that you normally don't get in a weekend of heads down coding, something like that. So I know as Consensys Labs, we're very interested in things that show that a Web3 solution actually has a user base and a customer base that needs it because of what it is, and because they've got a problem in their lives, not just because it's Web3.
I love that.
Yeah, that was such a great articulation. I have nothing to add.
Fantastic. Well, again, thanks for everybody for showing up. We can continue sort of this discussion later. We will be having more and more open channel sort of Q&As for people to continue to reach out. If you have questions that we can answer asynchronously, please reach us out to us on Discord, or the hashtag Consensys-Labs channel, which we're monitoring and kind of helping people through on the hackathons piece. We will see you tomorrow. We've got an intro to prototyping with the labs design team. Myself and Amelia, a coworker of mine, are going to be talking about what prototyping is, how you can kind of start thinking through your ideas and understand what you're testing and how you're testing it, and sort of build essentially these in minimum viable sort of smoke and mirrors ideas to make sure that you're actually validating the core of what your business is. Thanks again for everybody for showing up, and we will talk to you later.
Later, guys.